Sometimes a man doesn't need to hurt you to be harmful. He simply needs to confuse you, just enough that you doubt your own clarity. Take a moment, let that land. Not every wound bleeds. Some wounds are made of whispers, of cancelled plans, of words that say everything and actions that prove nothing. We live in a time where emotional noise often drowns out truth, where attention is mistaken for affection, and where many women, strong on the outside, remain deeply unsure of what love feels like on the inside. This is not because they are weak, but because no one ever taught them the difference between being wanted and being used. In this teaching, we do not rush to judgment. We step back, breathe, and observe. Together, we uncover 7 silent warnings, clues that reveal when a man is not in love, but is using your heart to fill the void in his own. Sometimes what we call love is just a reflection of what we've been conditioned to chase. When a woman finds herself emotionally invested in a man, it's often not because of who he truly is, but because of what he represents. A chance at emotional safety, a hope for lasting connection, a desire to feel seen, chosen, and understood. But this emotional longing can become a powerful blindfold. It masks over inconsistencies. It forgives silence. It rationalizes red flags in the name of potential. The danger is not in loving. The danger lies in loving without awareness, because the line between being in love and being used is subtle, not drawn in dramatic betrayals, but in quiet moments of imbalance. It's in how your presence is treated, in how your needs are handled, in how much of yourself you give, without it ever being truly returned. Real love nourishes. It grows in the light of truth and mutual respect. But when a man is only emotionally dependent, not emotionally invested, his interest in you becomes transactional. He seeks your warmth when he's cold, your comfort when he's anxious, your attention when he's empty. And yet, when your heart needs reciprocation, he disappears into his convenience. Emotional need often wears the disguise of affection. He texts late at night, not because he's thinking of you, but because he's lonely. He compliments your strength, not because he admires it, but because he benefits from it. He draws near when he's broken, but distances himself the moment you ask him to hold space for your healing. This isn't love, it's survival. And many women unknowingly become emotional providers for men who are not emotionally present. The distinction here is critical. Being needed is not the same as being loved. A woman must understand this difference deeply. Being needed strokes the ego, but it often empties the soul. Because when a man needs you more than he respects you, you become a means to an end. He is not drawn to your essence. He is attached to what you offer him: comfort, validation, presence. And once that need is fulfilled, or if you begin to require something in return, he will either pull away or manipulate the situation to regain control. There's a short story about a woman named Lila. She met a man who at first seemed like everything she had prayed for. He listened intently, praised her independence, made her feel adored. But over time, his presence became sporadic. He would vanish for days and return with vague excuses. When she voiced concern, he accused her of being needy. When she asked for consistency, he claimed he was overwhelmed. Yet whenever he was emotionally low, he'd come back to her, sending long messages about how no one else understood him the way she did. And Leela, empathetic and hopeful, welcomed him each time, until one evening, while journaling, she wrote a sentence that woke her up. "Less. He doesn't love me, he depends on me." That was the turning point. She began to see the pattern. He reached out only when it served him. He withheld when she needed. He praised her just enough to keep her engaged, but never committed enough to make her feel secure. This emotional imbalance is common, and it begins when a woman is taught to feel valuable only through sacrifice. If you were raised to be the giver, to tolerate discomfort, to prove yourself lovable by enduring inconsistency, you are more likely to confuse emotional intensity with emotional safety. But love that costs you your peace is not love, it's emotional labor. In relationships rooted in genuine love, both people feel safe being vulnerable. Both give and receive. Both remain aware of each other's emotional thresholds. But when a man is using a woman, even unknowingly, the energy flow is one-sided. He may offer words, but no actions. He may display passion, but avoid responsibility. He may perform love, but never be love. This is where self-mastery becomes essential. Because to recognize the truth about another person's intentions, you must first be grounded in the truth about your own worth. A woman who is centered in her emotional self. Awareness does not chase inconsistent affection. She does not confuse longing with love. She listens to how she feels after the interaction, refreshed or drained, expanded or diminished. Neuroscience tells us that our brain is designed to bond. Oxytocin, the hormone released during physical closeness or emotional intimacy, can create strong attachments, even in unhealthy dynamics. That's why it's important to assess not just how someone makes you feel in the moment, but how your nervous system reacts afterwards. Are you calm, secure, or anxious and second-guessing yourself? When love is real, the nervous system relaxes. You don't have to overanalyze, decode, or tolerate confusion. You feel emotionally seen. When it's not real, when you're being used, you stay in a cycle of tension and relief. He creates distance, then rushes in. He withholds, then apologizes. This creates what psychologists call a trauma bond. Your brain begins associating emotional volatility with closeness. You become addicted to the high of his return, even if you suffer during his absence. And so, it's essential to pay attention, not just to what he says, but to how your body reacts to him. Your body is wise. When a connection is authentic, your breath deepens. Your heart softens. Your mind becomes still. But when you're being used, even subtly, your body whispers warnings, headaches, tightness, gut discomfort, emotional fatigue. Learn to hear these signals. They are messengers of deeper truth. And still, there is another layer, perhaps even more subtle. Some men don't realize they're using you. They've never been taught emotional responsibility. They've only learned how to take, never how to hold space. And yet, their ignorance doesn't absolve the harm it causes. A woman must stop trying to be his teacher. You are not here to raise a man through your pain. You are here to evolve beside a partner who respects your soul. This brings us to something that is often overlooked: the role of self-trust. Many women already feel, deep inside, that something is off, but they silence that knowing. Why? Because acknowledging the truth requires change. It requires boundaries. And for those who have long been conditioned to prioritize others over self, setting boundaries can feel like abandonment, but it's not. It's alignment. A woman's energy is sacred. Her presence is medicine. But when that energy is given to someone who only consumes and never contributes, her own light begins to dim. She doubts herself. She questions her needs. She becomes emotionally fragmented. But when she stops and reclaims her clarity, everything changes. It is said, the one who knows others is intelligent, but the one who knows herself is enlightened. When you know yourself, your value, your emotional needs, your boundaries, you stop being impressed by shallow affection. You stop needing to be chosen, because you've already chosen yourself. Let us consider now the second layer of clarity: consistency. When a man truly values a woman, consistency is not something she has to beg for. It becomes a natural rhythm, an unspoken agreement built on mutual presence. Many women are told to wait and see, to be patient with a man's process. But But patience becomes a form of self-betrayal when it is used to justify a lack of effort. Consistency is not hard when intentions are clear. If a man can show up to work on time, meet deadlines, pursue hobbies with focus, he is capable of consistency. The question is never whether he can. The question is whether he chooses to be consistent with you. The truth is, people make time for what matters. And if someone's patterns are sporadic, if they show up only when convenient, you are not a priority, you are an option. This is not harsh. It is simply honest. There's a story of a woman named Mariam. She was seeing someone who seemed loving. When he was available, he would take her out, share poetry, hold her hand like she was the center of his universe. But he would also disappear for days without notice. He explained it away with stress, work, personal issues. She believed him. Until one day, she accidentally saw a calendar notification pop up on his phone. It was a dinner reservation for two with someone else. It broke her. But more than the betrayal, what shattered her was the realization that she had ignored the signs, the inconsistent effort, the broken promises, the fact that he only planned things last minute. She had mistaken his occasional passion for commitment. But love is not defined by grand moments. It's defined by regular presence. A person's character is not tested in how they act when it's easy to love you. It is revealed in how they show up when it's inconvenient. Inconsistency keeps a woman emotionally hooked. It's a psychological trap. The brain seeks patterns, and when patterns are disrupted without explanation, the mind becomes obsessed with trying to restore order. That's why inconsistent partners can feel more addictive than steady ones. Your brain is working overtime trying to make sense of their actions. But peace is not found in uncertainty. Peace is found in reliability, in the quiet knowing that someone will show up, not just when they desire affection, but when you need safety. Not just when they miss you, but when you feel alone. Not just when it benefits them, but when it matters to you. So ask yourself gently, but honestly, is this person consistent, or are you just constantly making excuses for their absence? Because love does not require convincing. It doesn't need you to chase. It doesn't survive on anxiety. It does not punish you with silence. Love speaks in reliability, in effort, in follow-through, and above all, it shows up. If he says he cares but doesn't call, if he says you matter but disappears, if he makes promises but never keeps them, you must stop listening to words and start listening to actions. Because words may charm, but consistency builds trust. And in the end, trust is the true foundation of love. There are moments in a woman's life where clarity doesn't come in the form of answers, but in the sudden realization of how tired she feels around someone. Not physically, but energetically, emotionally. You're not sure when it began. You only notice that after spending time with him, your thoughts feel heavier, your chest feels tight. You replay conversations in your mind, not because they were deep, but because they were confusing. You try to rationalize why you feel drained after what seemed like a simple interaction. This exhaustion is not coincidental. It is the body's intelligence, a quiet whisper that tells you something is being taken without being returned. What we don't often realize is that our energy, our emotional availability, our time, our attention is a currency, one far more valuable than money. And just like money, it can be spent wisely or wasted, invested in growth or stolen through manipulation. When a man is using you, even without physical abuse or cruel words, the theft is often emotional, subtle, spiritual. He may not raise his voice. He may smile, compliment, even express gratitude. But you leave the interaction emptied because everything you give, your listening, your care, your loyalty, is absorbed, but nothing ever truly flows back. Real love circulates. It breathes. You give, and you are filled in return. But being used feels like pouring into a bottomless cup. No matter how much you give, it never feels enough. Not because you are not enough, but because the one you are giving to has no intention of holding, only consuming. You might find yourself justifying his behavior, telling yourself he's going through a hard time, that he needs support, that he's had a rough childhood, or stress at work, or uncertainty in his life. And while compassion is a virtue, it must not come at the cost of your own well-being. There is a difference between being there for someone and being depleted by someone. If every interaction leaves you anxious, uncertain, or emotionally foggy, this is your system communicating imbalance. The nervous system is a sensitive barometer. It can detect emotional safety before the mind catches up. When you are around someone who honors you, your body relaxes, your breath deepens, your muscles release. But if your shoulders remain tense, your stomach tightens, and your thoughts become rapid after being around someone, that is not a space of love. That is emotional dysregulation masquerading as intimacy. There's a story about a woman named Hannah. She was generous by nature, loved to nurture. She met a man who quickly leaned into her nurturing side. He opened up quickly, shared his dreams, his struggles, his insecurities. Hannah, empathetic and deeply kind, made room for all of it. She encouraged him when he was down, celebrated him when he rose, and stood by him during all his personal storms. But weeks turned into months, and she noticed a pattern. He always had space for his own pain, but never for hers. When she was overwhelmed, he was unavailable. When she needed emotional presence, he'd go silent. When she voiced her needs, he'd accuse her of being difficult. Yet each time he needed to process something, he came back, seeking her warmth like a man returns to a fire on a cold night. Hannah didn't understand why she felt so tired. She thought being needed meant she was being loved. But eventually, after a long night of tears and silence, she understood she had become his emotional caretaker, not his equal. This dynamic is not uncommon. Many women become emotional providers in relationships without realizing it. Not because they are weak, but because they are strong. They have been taught to absorb, to heal, to carry the emotional burdens of others. But the strength to hold someone else must never lead you to abandon yourself. When a man is using you emotionally, the signs often hide behind flattery and charm. He may say you're his peace, his rock, his safe place. But he never asks about your peace, never wonders how you feel. He may even praise your independence, but subtly ensures you never truly express your own emotional needs. Over time, you begin to shrink, not visibly, but in the quiet corners of your inner world. You don't speak up as much. You minimize your feelings. You convince yourself that being there for him is more important than being heard. And that is the slow erosion of self. Emotional imbalance doesn't always look like drama. Sometimes it looks like always being the one to apologize, to initiate, to adapt. And the more you adapt, the more your essence is molded into something you no longer recognize. That is the cost of being used. You don't just lose energy. You lose parts of yourself. There's an old saying, you can't light yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. But many women do exactly that. They burn themselves out trying to maintain a connection that would not survive without their constant emotional labor. This is not love. This is emotional servitude. And the deeper danger is once you become accustomed to this pattern, your nervous system starts to normalize depletion. You begin to feel guilty for resting. You feel selfish for wanting reciprocity. You silence your truth to keep the peace. But a peace that requires your silence is not peace, it's control. This leads us to a more deceptive layer of being used. When manipulation is wrapped in affection, it is easy to spot cruelty. it is much harder to recognize manipulation when it's masked in love. And often, the men who use others emotionally are not overtly abusive. They are subtle, charming, kind in public, but behind closed doors, their affection is conditional. They give when it benefits them. They withdraw when it doesn't. You might notice patterns like this. When you start becoming distant, he showers you with attention. When you begin to question the relationship, he suddenly becomes attentive and loving. But once your energy returns, so does his distance. This is not love. It is emotional baiting. The psychological term for this is intermittent reinforcement. It's a tactic often seen in addiction and abusive cycles. You're given just enough affection to stay, but never enough to feel secure. And that scarcity keeps you craving more, confusing emotional manipulation for love. Imagine someone feeding you a single drop of water every hour. You're never fully quenched, but you're too afraid to leave the source. That's what emotional baiting feels like. And the tragedy is, over time, it teaches you to see breadcrumbs as a feast. There's a story of Ayana, a deeply spiritual woman who valued loyalty and integrity. She met a man who seemed aligned with her values. They spoke for hours about philosophy, future plans, emotional growth. She believed she had met someone truly rare, but slowly, subtle changes appeared. He would cancel plans last minute. He would ignore texts for days, then return with poetic messages. He'd listen to her dreams, but dismiss her concerns. Each time she brought up these inconsistencies, he'd turn the conversation around, asking why she was so negative or accusing her of being too sensitive. He would then follow up with affectionate messages, apologies, and promises to be better. And Ayana, committed to love and growth, gave him another chance, and another. Until one day, she realized the relationship required her to constantly abandon her own truth to preserve his comfort. Emotional manipulation doesn't always feel harsh. It can feel intimate, gentle, romantic. But when affection is used to control behavior, it ceases to be love. It becomes strategy. Love should never confuse you. It may challenge you. It may require growth, but it will never demand the loss of your clarity, and it will never ask you to betray yourself in order to keep it. Emotional manipulators often speak in compliments, but act in contradictions. They will say you're the best thing that ever happened to them, but treat you as disposable. They will tell you they admire your strength, but undermine your boundaries. They will praise your compassion, but weaponize it against you when you try to stand up for yourself. This kind of behavior causes what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. You hold two conflicting beliefs. He loves me, and he makes me feel unsafe. And the mind, in its attempt to resolve the conflict, often chooses the more comfortable narrative, even if it's false. That's why many women stay in emotionally manipulative relationships far longer than they should, because they hold on to the FF idea of who he could be, instead of honoring the ZEVAV reality of who he consistently is. But your peace should not come at the cost of your intuition. If something feels wrong, it usually is. Your mind may rationalize, your friends may advise patience, but your inner wisdom knows. It always knows. And the moment you choose to believe it, not just hear it, but truly believe it, is the moment you begin to reclaim your power. Because real love doesn't manipulate, it doesn't punish, it doesn't control through silence, guilt, or charm. Real love sits with you. It listens, it honors. It does not need to confuse you to keep you. It does not pull away to make you chase. It meets you in truth and walks with you in clarity. And it begins, always, with how you treat yourself, the standards you set, the energy you protect, the love you give yourself without compromise. Because a woman who knows her worth is not afraid to be alone. She is afraid only of losing herself in someone else's confusion. And once she chooses herself fully, those who cannot meet her truth will no longer be able to reach her energy. A man who speaks of love but hides from presence is a man who may never truly offer you his heart. Many people misunderstand what emotional availability actually looks like. It is not about how many poetic words someone can say. It is not about how intensely someone desires you, nor how often they reach for you in moments of their own loneliness. Emotional availability is presence. It is the ability to stay, to hold space, and to connect without running when discomfort enters the room. There are men who will whisper dreams into your ears and vanish when you speak of your own. There are men who will ask you to be patient while they figure things out, yet show no sign of figuring you into their life. There are men who promise everything, but when life gets real, when your heart opens and your vulnerability shows, they disappear into silence or blame. This is where many women find themselves confused. The man seemed emotionally deep. He said all the right things. He acknowledged your beauty, your intelligence, your strength. He said he had never met anyone like you. But when it was time to build something consistent, something sacred, something real, he began to pull away. Or worse, he began to criticize the very qualities he once adored. When a man is emotionally unavailable, his affection is inconsistent. He may be attentive for a few days and vanish for a week. He may express longing in private, yet never make you a part of his public life. He may ask about your feelings, only to deflect or disappear when you ask about his. His energy fluctuates based on what he needs, not what you need. This isn't love. It's emotional opportunism. He takes presence like a dose of medicine. Only when his pain rises does he return to you. But when your pain rises, he offers silence, distance, or vague responses. This kind of emotional presence is not presence at all. It is emotional avoidance disguised as connection. There is a story of a woman named Imani, a teacher in her 40s who had rebuilt herself after divorce. She met a man who spoke of healing, of growth, of soul journeys. He said he had done the work. He even quoted spiritual texts and talked about emotional alignment. Imani felt seen in a way she hadn't in years. But over time, she noticed the spaces where his presence should have been. Whenever she shared joy, he responded. But when she expressed sadness, frustration, or doubt, he became emotionally distant. He'd say he didn't want to. Bring down the vibration. He'd remind her to. Choose love over fear. What sounded wise at first eventually became a form of emotional denial. Imani was not being allowed to be fully human. She was being asked to suppress her truth, to maintain his comfort. This is one of the most subtle forms of emotional unavailability, the avoidance of depth under the pretense of spirituality or positivity. It creates a dynamic where only one person is allowed to feel deeply, while the other must manage their emotional expression to keep the relationship intact. The danger of this pattern is that it teaches you to become emotionally invisible. You stop expressing what you truly feel. You begin editing your emotions. You learn to only speak when you know it won't disrupt the fragile balance. But love that cannot contain all of you is not love. It's a cage dressed in affection. Emotional availability is not about perfection. It's about presence in discomfort. It's about the ability to stay when the conversation is hard, to listen when your partner is vulnerable, to remain open when triggered, to love not just the light in someone, but also to sit beside their shadows without shrinking. And here's the truth many avoid. Most emotionally unavailable people are not aware of their own limitations. They think they are loving you. They believe they are doing their best. But love is not about effort. It's about awareness. And without self-awareness, effort becomes empty. It becomes performative. To discern the difference, ask yourself this: does he grow with you? Or does he ask you to shrink so he can remain comfortable? When a man is emotionally present, you feel safe, not just physically, but energetically. You feel heard without needing to repeat yourself. You feel held without always having to ask. You feel like you can breathe around him. You don't walk on eggshells. You don't analyze every message. You don't have to explain your heart. This kind of presence is not born out of luck or chemistry. It is a reflection of emotional maturity. And emotional maturity is a result of someone doing their own internal work before inviting someone else to share their emotional space. This leads into an even deeper truth, one that many people are not taught. Your energy is not just something that others interact with. It is something that determines who comes into your life and how they treat you. Your inner state becomes your filter. Your energetic frequency becomes your boundary. When you are emotionally whole, people who cannot match that level of emotional presence will begin to fall away. Not because you are unlovable, but because they cannot handle the clarity of your light. Your wholeness becomes too confronting for someone who only knows how to survive in chaos. There is a quiet power that comes when a woman truly knows who she is. She no longer begs for love. She no longer explains her worth. She no longer stays in places where her value must be proven. She walks away, not with bitterness, but with grace, because she understands that her peace is sacred. There's a powerful story from Eastern tradition about a monk who carried a cup of water through the village. When asked why he never drank it, he replied, "Because I want to see who would offer to pour it into my hands." When he noticed that most people were eager to take, but not to offer, he emptied the cup and walked on. This is the kind of discernment every woman must carry. Your energy, your love, your presence. It is the water. Do not offer it to those who only reach for it in thirst, but disappear when it's time to refill your spirit. Your energy is not random. It responds to your beliefs. If you believe you must earn love, your energy will attract those who make you prove your value. If you believe your silence keeps peace, your energy will attract those who benefit from your quietness. But if you believe your wholeness is sacred, your energy will naturally create boundaries that protect it. This is not mysticism. It is energetic law. Just as nature attracts what supports it, flowers attract bees, not flies, so does your internal state attract relationships that reflect your self-understanding. When a woman is unsure of her own worth, she overextends. She gives too much too soon. She allows too much for too long. She fears that setting boundaries will push people away. And maybe it will. But boundaries don't push away love. They push away what's not aligned with love. It is better to walk alone in truth than to sit beside someone who only values the parts of you that serve their needs. And what's more, when your energy is aligned with self-trust, you begin to attract not just healthier partners, but also clarity in communication. You no longer entertain inconsistency. You no longer interpret silence as mystery. You no longer seek meaning in mixed signals, because you know that love, when real, is direct. It's not afraid to name itself. It's not afraid to commit. It's not afraid to show up again and again, even when things get difficult. A woman once shared that she realized she was growing when her loneliness began to feel more peaceful than her relationship ever had. That is the wisdom of aligned energy. When solitude begins to heal you more than someone's presence ever could, you have stepped into sacred clarity. And sacred clarity does not chase, it does not force, it simply radiates. And what is meant for that kind of woman will rise to meet her, not because she begged, but because her energy made begging unnecessary. We must understand, love is not something we receive only from others. It is something we first awaken in ourselves. And the depth of that self-love will determine what we tolerate, what we invite, and what we finally release. So if you find yourself being used, manipulated, drained, or confused, return to your inner state. Ask yourself, what have I accepted in the absence of clarity? Then listen, not to the noise of your fears, but to the whisper of your spirit. It always knows the answer. True love does not confuse, deplete, or demand that you sacrifice your essence to be seen. It stands quietly beside you, present even in your silence, steady even in your storms. It does not arrive with chaos, nor does it threaten to leave every time you ask for consistency, honesty, or depth. Love, when real, does not seek to use your heart as a placeholder for someone's emotional gaps. It seeks to honor it. Many women have been taught to endure instead of discern, to prove their worth instead of preserve it. But a woman who has returned to herself, who has tuned her inner awareness, will no longer chase shadows, hoping they turn into light. She will no longer accept words without action, presence without effort, or affection without depth. She will recognize that emotional need is not the same as emotional availability. That someone seeking comfort is not necessarily seeking connection. That her peace is not something to be negotiated in exchange for being wanted. In the end, the question is not whether he loves you, it's whether you have built a relationship with yourself so strong, so wise, so grounded, that you no longer allow anyone to write your worth in temporary ink. Let your clarity become your protection. Let your stillness become your teacher. And let your love for yourself become the standard that shapes every relationship you choose to welcome moving forward.